We covered a lot of questions in previous videos regarding the why and the how and what do we want to do. And now we're going to actually get started about what we should do to get started. So first of all, there is really no real way to start cybersecurity. There's no one path that leads you to ultimate glory. I would say that there are some advantages and disadvantages to any decision you'll make, but it's pretty much the same in any other field you'll select to go with. You're not really knowing where you're going into. You don't really understand all the things in the field, and you don't really know your preferences if you've never done cybersecurity before. So you might like something and you might hate something else, and it might be the opposite. And it's something that you have to try a bit before you know if it's really the direction for you. So, what are my getting started tips? So, I would suggest starting with something that you find fun. Some people are in love with the ideas of protecting their device or protecting their iPad or their iPhone or their user and making sure everything is secure. Some people like it and find that this is the interesting things that they like to do. Some people find attacking, actually breaking into stuff, cracking a user password, or doing something that's more related to what attackers do as their favorite pastime and something they consider fun in cybersecurity. So, going for something you find fun is a very good idea because it will help you learn. And learning is all about having fun in the process, or it's very tedious and you won't learn too much about it. So, I would suggest targeting something that you find fun, even if it's something you saw in a movie. You're not really sure if it's fun to do it or not. I would still go with it. Another thing that you can go with is something that you find interesting. A lot of people who transition from IT in general, IT industry are like maybe someone who managed servers or someone who managed the network, and they're like, okay, so I want to understand cybersecurity a bit better, and maybe they have some background with a piece of technology that they like to work with. So it's a very easy transition, or at least I'll give an example. If someone is an IT administrator that manages firewall, that manages network routers, for example, or switches, for them to transition into cybersecurity and manage firewalls, it's not that hard of a transition. It works very similar in a lot of aspects, and there's a lot of new knowledge related to cybersecurity, but it's something that they can find interesting and maybe even a general progression in work or in any other field that adds a lot of flavor to what they already do in networking. So I hope it makes sense when I touch this point. And the last thing is something economical. I like to throw it out there for people who have zero experience with cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is a very fast and growing market. There's a high demand for people with cybersecurity skills. I anticipated, and not only me, there's a lot of information online that cybersecurity will become a bigger field. It is already a very high demand field, and it has a lot of high demand for high quality people. That's one thing, but also high demand for very skilled workers, which means higher pay and also higher benefits. And a lot of people who are looking for their future are finding cybersecurity to be very lucrative in terms of money. And this is something that I'm just going to throw it out there. If you start right now and the only answer that's come to mind is I want to make a lot of money and cybersecurity is a way to do it, I can't really argue against it. If you put in the time and effort and learn and have this beginning and go with experience and grow your resume and grow your knowledge, you'll make a lot of money with cybersecurity, and it's a very good and viable option to make very decent pay. Another thing that is interesting is that it's also very remote. So you don't necessarily have to be in the office. There's all kinds of benefits from working with the cybersecurity. Most of them can be that you can work from home. I've done some of my work as consultancy from home, and there's a lot of things that you can do offline without the need to go to the office. So that's another benefit that exist. So I gave you the where to start generally. I would put that there is another classification, or at least something that I consider a classification between where do you want to start? Do you want to start in the good place where people are focusing on security and protecting the environment, or on the, I'm doing air quotes here, the bad place where people go with offensive security, basically prevent hacking into things, breaking stuff, make sure you're able to bypass security. And now, for someone who is outside the field of security, you're like, I want to be a good guy. The bad guys are not necessarily bad, and the good guys are not necessarily good. It's two fields that exist in cybersecurity. There are people who like to be the people who build the defenses and protect the environment and improve the environment, and there are people who like to attack the environment and break it and pen test it, basically. And the idea is that people who are doing security need to check themselves like any other field. So you have the let's take construction, for example. You have the architect that builds the structure, but you also have the field engineer to test to see if the structure is up to par to what was designed, an architect, and basically checking to see that what was designed is what was delivered and that it works as intended. There's maybe a city inspection by an auditor that checks to see that all the materials are up to spec. They're all part of the construction field. And this is the same in security. If you have a team that builds security, you need to have a team that tests the security. And the only way to test the security is by trying to break it and hack it and do all kinds of things that are related to the bad aspects of security. Obviously, there is this concept of you need to know both, and that is quite true. You need to know both to some degree. But I've known very good security people who are only in the good side of things and knew security from the defender side. And there's a lot of people who are very good in security that knows mostly the offensive stuff. So they're not really aware of the IT, or at least that kind of base knowledge to a high degree. They know how to break stuff. They don't necessarily know how to build them and create them and figure them. I would say it's a very good approach to have some information, some knowledge in both fields. I would argue that most people, the majority of the cyberspace or the cybersecurity space, are going to the quote good path. And there's a lot less people who go with the bad path. And the bad path is very not bad is not bad at all in terms of knowledge. And I find it to be the added value in a lot of places where the fact that I had this knowledge or I had this perspective made me a better defender when I needed it. So I would argue that both routes are fantastic to get started. Find the one that is more fun, beneficial for you. And I do want to cover a few topics that both sides need to learn, or what is the variation or changes between those two approaches. So, from the defender perspective, you will learn the security practices. You'll learn all the security practices, what you want to do and what you don't want to do. And this is something that you can learn in multiple ways, and I'll touch this in the next videos. But the main idea is that you want to understand security, how it's supposed to be in an environment. You want to also learn a security product or two, classes that are targeting, and I'm not referring to an actual classroom, I'm more referring to like a class of tools. So an antivirus solution, that's something that is like a class of products. That's something you should learn. A firewall is another class of products. That's something you should learn as well. Learning one or two classes of products will give you good information to get started with. And pretty much it doesn't matter which vendor you'll choose to go in terms of studying and learning this infrastructure. And I will touch this in later videos as well. You need to be aware of how those products work. And usually if you pick one product that does the same thing, like an antivirus from 10 different vendors, the base is very much the same. There are variations, but the base is the same. So learning one of those tools and products and understanding how they work and why they work is a very good place to start. Cybersecurity news. There's multiple sites that offer cybersecurity news. I'm going to recommend a few that I use at the end of the next video, I'm assuming. And those places are places where you can gain knowledge and more information about what's going on in terms of tools, new things that are coming out there, vulnerabilities and things that are new to the field, and also all kinds of things that are related to keeping your heartbeat and understanding what's going on. I would mention here something that is maybe a lot later will be important when we'll touch real world experience. But if you're aware of what's going on around you in the security news world, it gives you a lot of advantages when people talk to you in the field. Like, you understand what's going on, you've heard about things that are happening near real time, it gives you a very impressive, let's say like this, impressive points in a lot of discussions as well. So it pays to be in some contact to these things. I'll just throw something out there. If there was a huge breach to a company or a huge vulnerability that was discovered in Windows and you're not aware of it, and then you don't do anything about it, how can you become a good security person, a good cybersecurity expert, or anyone? You're not aware of even of something that happened that has a lot of ramification that might even shake the foundation of what you do. So this is why it's very important to at least have some understanding of what's going on in the field. And last bullet is IT knowledge, and this is where it's a very important part of being a defender, is to understand the assets, the IT technology that you're protecting, the IT infrastructure. And this is something that I will cover some references, but there is some kind of a base that if you don't really have that knowledge, not necessarily you can't work in cybersecurity, but there is a gap that you'll need to cover at some stage of your career that you won't be able to bypass unless you learn those things. And I won't touch it further here, but it's something that you need to consider. And well, if you're talking about the second route with the people who are more interested in offensive security, the main difference is that when they learn something, it's more focused towards how to break it or asking the harder question in terms of how can I leverage it for offensive security. So, for example, for security practices, we're more interested in the bad ones. People who don't change their password. That's something that me as an attacker might want to be aware of. People keep their password saved in a file called password.txt. You send people an email saying, please send me your password, and they actually send it. There's all kinds of things that you need to be aware of. People who don't back up their environment, or all kinds of things that are interesting. And an attacker or the bad guys are more interested in the bad security practices, be aware of them so they can use them as tools later. As security threats, more towards what are the threats that exist in the world. Some of the threats are like buzzwords that you need to be aware of, like what is ransomware, what is malware, what is a zero-day exploit. There's all kinds of words and phrases that you need to be aware of. Obviously, if you know them, you need to also understand what they mean. And this is where this knowledge is something that is accumulated over time, but you need to be aware of the threats. So you need to understand how they're called and what's their name. And hacking tools is something that is like similar to a security product. You should be aware of one or two tools that are meant for hacking. These tools can be all kinds of tools that are related to breaching someone's Wi-Fi, or to creating a reverse shell and connecting to a server and compromising it. It can be an exploit that you run over the network. It can be any tool that you would like. Having knowledge in a few tools to get started will give you the confidence and also build your understanding of how these tools are exploiting, how security is bypassed and breached. And this is a very good place to start. And the last thing, it's also related to cybersecurity news, but I'm more focused towards cybercrime. The reason being is not necessarily that you're interested in the crime, but there is the level of opening your mind to understanding that security from the bad guy perspective, you need to be aware of what the bad guys are doing. So if there is a new attack that is being used against a financial customer, for example, and this new attack had all kinds of characteristics that are unique or new, this is something that you can leverage when you understand how security works or how offensive security works in your work or your learning as well. So it will teach you what's going on up to date, and there's a lot of benefit here. So I'm going to stop this video here and we'll continue in the next part.